You know, um, when we usually talk about a classic locked room mystery, we picture exactly that, like a dusty library in an old English manor, right?
Right, yeah, like a heavy oak door bolted shut from the inside.
Exactly. Maybe a single latched window. The boundaries are absolute. It's this perfectly closed system.
And the puzzle is just, well, entirely contained within those four walls.
Yeah, but consider what happens when that locked room isn't actually a room at all.
Oh, this is such a wild concept to wrap your head around.
Right. What happens when the locked room is a massive barrier island? One sitting, 10 miles off the coast, surrounded entirely by the Gulf of Mexico.
And we're talking about an island with hundreds of people coming and going on, like one of the busiest holidays of the year.
Exactly. Suddenly, the walls of our mystery are literally made of water, and the locked door is simply the terrifying reality that you just cannot walk home.
It completely upends the traditional investigative framework. I mean, it really does.
It does.
You have this geographically isolated environment, right? An island where you can only arrive or leave by vessel. But socially, it is completely porous.
Hundreds of boats, thousands of overlapping interactions.
Exactly. Which makes figuring out who was where and, who was with whom and precisely when things happened, well, exponentially more difficult than a traditional closed-door scenario.
And that is exactly the landscape we are stepping into today. So welcome to this deep dive.
We have prepared a really customized, intensely detailed exploration for you today.
We really have. We're focusing on a case that is not just procedurally complex, but deeply, deeply emotional.
Yeah, it's a case that has captured both national and international attention.
It has literally sparked federal investigations into online harassment, and, it has left a grieving family fighting this just agonizing battle for transparency.
Right, we are talking about the tragic death of 18-year-old Nolan Xavier Wells.
Just for some context for you, Nolan was a black athlete. He was a community college football player from Mississippi.
And he was found dead in the water off the coast of Horn Island, right after a July 4th boat trip with a group of friends.
Yeah, and the narrative of how he actually ended up in that water, it has become one of the most fiercely debated, heavily scrutinized topics in the country right now.
Oh, absolutely.
We have a massive stack of sources to go through with you today to try and, well, make sense of all this.
And we are pulling from a lot of different places.
Yeah.
Local Mississippi news reports, official statements from the Jackson County Sheriff's Office.
And the district attorney, right.
Yeah, plus deeply contested independent medical reviews, national coverage from outlets like The Guardian and USA Today.
Not to mention direct, super impassioned statements from Nolan's family. And a really thorough forensic debunking of the internet theories that have just caught absolute fire on platforms like TikTok.
Our mission for you in this deep dive is basically to act as a filter.
Yeah, we need to extract the verified, objective facts from what has honestly become an overwhelming, truly deafening sea of digital noise.
So we are going to meticulously map out the timeline of that July 4th trip.
We really need to untangle the glaring, frankly baffling contradictions between what witnesses claim happened and what the factual inconsistencies suggest.
And we'll evaluate the contested medical findings regarding the reported soft tissue discoloration too.
Plus, we'll explore the legal void created by these grand jury proceedings and trace the profound emotional journey of the Wells family.
But before we take a single step forward, there is something we need to make incredibly clear to you, the listener.
Yes, absolutely. This case touches on deeply sensitive, racially charged historical contests.
It involves passionate public opinions, real trauma, and intense national scrutiny.
Our role today, like our only role, is strictly to report and synthesize the facts provided in the source material.
Right. We are not here to take sides.
Not at all. We are not here to endorse any unverified theories, regardless of where they originate politically or socially.
We are just here to impartially guide you through the documents, the timelines, and the evidence.
So you can understand exactly what is known, what is unknown, and why the truth remains so frustratingly elusive in this particular case.
Because knowledge is most valuable when it is understood and applied objectively.
To honor the reality of this situation, we have to look at the mechanics of the investigation, the science of the pathology, and the timeline of the digital footprint.
Without letting the surrounding noise dictate our analysis. We just have to follow the data.
So let's dive right in. Let's start with the physical environment and the foundational timeline.
Because before we can even begin to understand the discrepancies in the witness statements, we have to establish the baseline of Nolan's last known days.
Right. It's crucial to build this scaffolding first.
The timeline is really our only objective anchor here.
And what makes this case so notoriously difficult is that we have a mix of incredibly precise digital timestamps on one hand.
And then incredibly hazy, contradictory human memories on the other.
Exactly. So the narrative really begins on the evening of July 3rd. Nolan has dinner with his family.
His parents are Christine Wansley and Elmore Wansley.
Yeah. He comes from a large family, actually. He's surrounded by siblings, including his brothers Jalen, Jaden, Ethan, Elmore Jr., and a sister, Carlisha.
That sounds like a really tight-knit group.
Definitely. So he has this family dinner, and then he leaves to stay overnight with friends. The purpose is to prep for a big 4th of July boat trip the next morning.
And his mother, Christine, she later points out this agonizing detail that this dinner is the very last time she ever saw her son alive.
I can't even imagine.
It's heartbreaking. But from a behavioral analysis standpoint, that July 3rd dinner establishes a vital piece of context.
Which is?
That this trip was entirely planned. I mean, this wasn't a spontaneous, spur-of-the-moment decision to jump on a boat.
Right. She wasn't just tagging along at the last second.
Exactly. He was actively preparing for a full day out on the water, choosing to stay overnight with the group to presumably get an early start and coordinate logistics.
And checking the boat's GPS data, they actually do get a relatively early start.
Yeah, they do.
On the morning of July 4th, at exactly 9:56 a.m., the boat Nolan is on departs from a private dock in Ocean Springs, Mississippi.
9:56 a.m. Very specific.
Super specific. It takes them a little over an hour to make the crossing. And at 11:14 a.m., the boat arrives at Horn Island.
Okay, let's pause to contextualize the geography for you here because it is central to everything that follows.
Oh, please do, because it's not just a regular beach.
No, not at all. Horn Island is a remote barrier island in the Gulf of Mexico. It is about 10 miles off the Mississippi coast.
10 miles? That is a massive distance.
10 miles over open water is a vast, unforgiving distance. It is absolutely not a swim you can make.
Right.
It's not a distance you can simply flag down a passing taxi to cover. Once you step foot on that island, you are entirely reliant on a marine vessel to return to the mainland.
You're essentially trapped without a boat.
Exactly. And furthermore, on July 4th, this ordinarily remote, desolate island is transformed into this massive, chaotic gathering spot.
Right, because of the holiday.
Yeah, there are hundreds of people, dozens of boats anchored near the shore, essentially creating a massive floating and beachside party.
So they arrive at 11:14 a.m. into this crowded, sun-drenched, chaotic environment. And for a few hours, everything ostensibly seems normal.
Until we hit the critical window.
Right. Around 3 p.m. is when Nolan is last seen by his friends near the island.
And this is the exact moment where the objective timeline and the human narrative just violently fracture.
According to his friends, specifically Trayston Shepard and Warren Hudson, who have spoken extensively in public, Nolan chose to stay behind on the island.
They claim he was talking to a girl and planned to catch a ride back on another boat.
Which immediately presents a glaring contradiction in behavioral expectations. I mean, Nolan's parents have expressed utter disbelief at this claim.
Yeah, his father, Elmore, explicitly stated that he rigorously taught his sons to stay with the group whenever they went out.
The family argues that separating himself from his only guaranteed ride home in a remote location 10 miles offshore was just entirely out of character for an obedient, rule-following athlete like Nolan.
It just doesn't fit the profile of who he was.
But let me jump in here because the timeline keeps moving and the digital timestamps completely derail the friend's explanation.
Oh, this is the part that is just so hard to reconcile.
It really is. At around 4 p.m., a call is made from one of the teens on the boat to a private towing and rescue company called Seatow.
Right, they are calling for emergency assistance because their boat is experiencing a mechanical failure.
Specifically, they report a broken bilge pump, and they are actively taking on water.
But here's the piece of information that turns this entire case upside down.
The caller tells the Seatow dispatcher explicitly that everyone is on board.
That phrase is a massive collision of facts. I mean, let's break down the mechanics of this emergency for a second.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack that. What exactly is a bilge pump?
So a bilge pump sits at the very bottom of a boat's hull. Its sole purpose is to pump out accumulating water.
Which is pretty important when you're on the ocean.
Very. When a boat is 10 miles offshore, taking on water, and the primary mechanism to expel that water fails, you are literally in a race against gravity and time.
That sounds terrifying.
It is. Emergencies of this nature create absolute chaos. Adrenaline spikes, panic sets in, and decision-making becomes incredibly rushed.
Sure, which is understandable for a group of teenagers.
It is. However, When you communicate with a rescue service like CTAL or the Coast Guard, the very first, most vital piece of information they require is a head count.
Right. They need to know how many lives are at stake.
Exactly. And the caller definitively stated, everyone is on board.
That is not a subjective opinion.
No, it is a factual assertion that violently clashes with the friend's narrative that Nolan was left behind on the island at 3 p.m.
And the tracking data confirms that the boat actually left the area of the island at 4:31 p.m.
So you have this impossible sequence of events.
Right. A last sighting of Nolan on the beach at 3.0, an emergency call at 4.0 saying everyone is on the sinking boat, and a departure back to the mainland at 4.31.
And then hours pass in total silence.
Total silence. It isn't until late that evening, around 11 p.m., that Nolan's mother receives a phone call from Nolan's friend, Warren Hudson, informing her Nolan is missing.
This agonizing call prompts her to immediately contact the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, which kicks off a frantic multi-agency search around midnight.
The delay between that 4:31 p.m. departure and the 11 p.m. phone call is another critical span of unaccounted time.
We have 6.5 hours where the friends are presumably safely back on the mainland.
And Nolan is supposedly stranded on a barrier island as the sun goes down and the crowds disperse.
Yet no formal alarm is raised to the family or authorities until nearly midnight.
Which inevitably leads to the tragic events of July 5th and 6th. A massive search operation spins up involving the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, the U.S. Coast Guard, and the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources.
Nolan's father even tasted the water himself to join the search.
He did. Then, on the morning of July 6th, at approximately 8:45 a.m., a U.S. Park Service ranger makes a horrific discovery.
Nolan's body is found face down in the water at the northwestern tip of Horn Island.
Officials initially report to the public that there are no immediate signs of injury or trauma.
An official autopsy is ordered, and the Sheriff's Department releases a preliminary statement that no foul play is suspected.
Bringing this back to your initial analogy, this timeline operates exactly like that modern locked room mystery.
It really does. The digital timestamps, the 9.56 departure, the 4.0 C tow call, the 4.31 departure, these are objective, unalterable realities.
But the vast space between those timestamps is filled with human behavior that, on its face, appears highly illogical and contradictory.
Exactly.
I find myself completely stuck on reconciling these specific digital timestamps with the intensely hazy human elements of that afternoon.
It's the biggest hurdle in the case.
How do we make sense of a boat leaving at 4.31, calling for a rescue at 4.0 saying everyone is on board, but the passengers claiming they left a core member of their group on the beach an hour earlier?
Well, looking at how the human brain processes crisis management provides some context, though not a complete excuse.
Right. Panic does weird things to people.
It does. When a boat is actively sinking, the frontal lobe, which handles logical sequencing and complex decision-making, can become rapidly overwhelmed by the amygdala.
Which is the brain's fight-or-flight center, right?
Precisely. Teenagers in a panic are entirely capable of making exceptionally poor, short-sighted decisions.
Sure.
However, telling a dispatcher everyone is on board is not a nuanced, complex calculation.
It's a head count.
It is a binary observation. You either visually confirm your friend is on the sinking vessel with you, or you don't.
Right. There is no gray area there.
This specific contradiction elevates the entire situation from a tragic accident of poor planning into a highly complex, deeply suspicious investigation.
It really forces us to scrutinize the actual testimony of the witnesses. Let's follow that thread directly into the witness statements.
Because a physical timeline is only half the story.
The other half is the human narrative, and this is where the story simply refuses to hold weight.
We essentially have two primary narratives regarding the events of that afternoon that are in direct, irreconcilable conflict.
I've been poring over the statements from the friends who were with Nolan. We have Tristan Shepard, who says he was part of Nolan's tight-knit group.
And Warren Hudson, who publicly described himself as Nolan's best friend and stated they were like brothers.
Both have been highly vocal in the media defending their actions on that day. Their core argument is that the failing bilge pump created an absolute, unavoidable emergency.
They had to focus entirely on getting the boat back to the mainland before it swamped and sank.
Crucially, they maintain they didn't just abandon him silently on the beach.
According to their public statements, they actively implored Nolan to get on the boat.
Shepard reportedly claimed they yelled, "Nolan, get the FK on the boat. We're leaving. The boat's having issues."
But they state that Nolan explicitly verbally declined.
They claim his reasoning for staying behind was that he had met a young woman later identified as Katie McCormack.
And he was supposedly so engrossed in talking to her that he decided to figure out an alternative way home later.
Okay, I have to push back on this logic immediately.
Please do.
Just put yourself in the shoes of an 18-year-old for a second. If your boat is actively taking on water and your friends are screaming in a panic that they have to leave a remote island 10 miles offshore right this second.
Wouldn't basic human nature dictate that you physically grab your friend?
Yes. And beyond that, what rational teenager chooses to be stranded 10 miles out in the Gulf of Mexico just to keep talking to someone they just met with absolutely no guaranteed ride back to the mainland?
That defiance of basic self-preservation is the exact anomaly Nolan's parents and their civil rights attorney, Ben Crump, are zeroing in on.
Because it contradicts everything they know about his personality.
Exactly. But the friction here goes much deeper than just questioning the questionable logic of a teenager in love or lust.
Right. There is actual counter-testimony.
There is a direct testimonial rebuttal to a friend's entire narrative.
This is where the story fractures completely. The friends are saying Nolan stayed specifically to talk to Katie McCormack.
But according to attorney Ben Crump, that is absolutely not what Katie's side of the story reflects.
Gracie McCormack, who is Katie's sister, reportedly told investigators that Katie assumed Nolan was getting back on the boat with his friends.
According to this side of the story, Katie had absolutely no idea they were going to leave him stranded there.
The investigative implications here are massive.
They really are. You have the friends stating definitively he refused to get on the boat because he was with her.
And you have the young woman's side stating, "We thought he got on the boat with them."
These are not slight variations in perspective based on where someone was standing on the beach.
No, these are mutually exclusive realities.
Ben Crump summarized the absurdity of it perfectly during a press conference when he asked, "She's saying he went and got on the boat. They saying he didn't get on the boat, so which is it?"
And Christine Wansley, Nolan's mother, added another layer of doubt to this.
Did.
She pointed out that the girl reportedly described her interaction with Nolan as essentially a hand-by passing conversation.
Right. That does not sound like an interaction so deeply engrossing that a teenager would casually wave off his only ride home on a sinking vessel.
When analyzing human behavior in a potential criminal or accident investigation, you constantly look for corroborating evidence, right?
Absolutely. If the friends claim he stayed for a girl, the girl's testimony absolutely must corroborate that interaction.
But in this case, it shatters it.
It really does.
Yeah.
And then we must circle back to the sea tow call.
Oh man, the sea tow call.
The friends claim they were yelling at him on the beach, and he refused to board. Yet, presumably, just minutes later during the 4 p.m. call, they tell a dispatcher everyone is on board.
The cognitive dissonance required to hold all these statements as true simultaneously is staggering.
It truly is. To maintain objectivity, we must acknowledge the profound emotional toll this has taken on the friends.
Yeah, we have to recognize that. Shepard has spoken publicly about carrying immense guilt.
He stated he beats himself up every night, wondering if things would have been different if he had forced Nolan onto the boat.
And Hudson, as we noted, was the one who eventually made the difficult call to the mother and the Coast Guard.
They adamantly maintain they are telling the truth and would never intentionally harm Nolan.
But from a strict investigative standpoint, expressions of guilt do not resolve the structural impossibilities of their timeline.
No, they don't. The direct, irreconcilable contradiction between the friends and the young woman Nolan was speaking to is the friction point that turns this from a tragic drowning into a deeply suspicious mystery.
And that behavioral anomaly brings us directly to the physical items left behind.
Right, the evidence.
If the timeline is the scaffolding and the witness statements are the cracking foundation, the digital and physical breadcrumbs are the actual debris we have to sift through.
We need to evaluate the evidence found, or rather conspicuously not found, on Nolan's phone, along with the local tracking data.
Because the physical evidence adds an entirely new, incredibly complex layer of inconsistency to the narrative.
We are moving away from subjective human memory and into the realm of objective physical artifacts.
And the first major breadcrumb is baffling. Nolan's phone did not stay with him on Horn Island.
Which is wild.
While he was supposedly stranded 10 miles offshore, his family, frantic with worry late at night, was using a tracking app like Life 360 or Find My Friends to locate his device.
And they successfully tracked the phone, but not to the island.
Right. They tracked it to a friend's house miles away on the mainland, where it was eventually retrieved by a family friend.
The anomalies multiply from there. It wasn't just the phone.
His car keys were also retrieved separately from a completely different friend's house on the mainland.
Let's just pause and think about the sheer logistics of this.
Seriously, leaving your smartphone behind at a massive beach party in the modern era is incredibly rare.
Leaving your phone and your keys behind while consciously planning to be stranded on an island without a ride home makes zero logical sense.
How are you supposed to coordinate this magical alternative ride back to the mainland if you don't have a phone to text anyone?
And how are you supposed to drive home once you theoretically get to the dock if your keys are at someone else's house?
You're highlighting the exact logistical paradox that fuels the family's deep suspicion.
The friends, Shepard and Hudson, have offered an explanation for this, though.
They state that it was common, accepted practice among their group to leave expensive phones on the boat's dashboard.
You're in a harsh marine environment, surrounded by salt water and sand, and people are constantly in and out of the water swimming.
They argue you leave the device on the dash to protect it from catastrophic water damage.
Hudson specifically noted to the media that he didn't recall seeing anyone taking their phones into the water that day.
I mean, I can understand the logic of protecting a $1,000 device from salt water.
Sure, it makes sense on paper.
If you are just going for a quick swim and coming right back to the boat, yes, leave the phone on the dash.
But let's apply this to the friends' timeline.
Right. If you are standing on the beach and your friends are yelling from a rapidly sinking boat, "We are leaving right now, get on."
And you make the conscious decision to say, no, I'm going to stay here.
Wouldn't your very next immediate thought be, okay, toss me my phone and my keys so I'm not completely helpless?
That is the crux of the issue right there. The friend's explanation regarding saltwater damage makes perfect logical sense in isolation.
But forensic analysis requires synthesizing that explanation with the totality of the circumstances.
Exactly. If he consciously chose to stay behind, fully knowing the boat was departing without him, the failure to retrieve his phone and keys points to a massive, inexplicable lapse in judgment.
And his family insists he simply did not possess that level of recklessness.
And the mystery of the phone only deepens when the family actually gets the device back in their hands.
Yes, when Christine Wansley recovered her son's phone, she noticed something deeply chilling.
She scoured the device, and there were zero photos or videos from July 4th on it.
Not a single image from the boat ride, the island, or the party.
Which, mathematically speaking, regarding teenage digital habits, is a profound statistical anomaly.
You have an 18-year-old at a massive, vibrant 4th of July party on a barrier island surrounded by hundreds of peers.
The total absence of any digital media captured from that specific day is jarring to investigators and the family alike.
The family has stated they strongly suspect that data might have been intentionally deleted from the device before it was finally returned to them.
From an evidentiary standpoint, we must remember that a lack of data is still data. It tells a story.
Right, it paints a picture.
When you combine the missing keys, the conflicting witness statements about his departure, the deleted media, and the tracking data showing his essential belongings scattered across the mainland.
While his body was found at the island.
Yes. It creates a very distinct pattern of absence. This isn't just one odd teenage choice.
It is a cascading series of logistical anomalies that rightly fuels the family's suspicion that the narrative they're being fed has been heavily sanitized.
That missing digital footprint is haunting, especially when you contrast it with the physical evidence we actually do have, the forensic findings on his body.
Which takes us into a deeply contested, highly technical medical arena,
where official government silence clashes dramatically with an independent autopsy.
The medical findings are undeniably the most technically complex aspect of this entire case.
They require an understanding of pathology, and they've become the source of some of the most intense, bitter public division.
Currently, we are dealing with two separate autopsies.
Right. The first one is the official autopsy conducted by the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office.
And what is deeply frustrating is that we know absolutely nothing about its contents.
Nothing at all.
The results, the toxicology, the examiner's notes, they are entirely sealed from the public.
We'll get into the legal mechanics of why that is in a moment. But that absolute vacuum of official information is what led the grieving family to take drastic action.
Feeling completely shut out by the state process, the Wells family fundamentally distrusted the official narrative.
So they commissioned their own independent autopsy.
This was notably funded with the assistance of civil rights activist and former NFL player Colin Kaepernick.
The procedure was performed in Washington, D.C. by a highly respected forensic pathologist named Dr. Robert Mitchell.
Who crucially has no ties or obligations to Mississippi law enforcement.
Right. The results of Dr. Mitchell's independent autopsy were highly anticipated across the country.
When he released his preliminary findings, he ruled the cause and manner of death as undetermined pending investigation.
We need to take a moment to clarify precisely what undetermined means in a forensic and legal context, because the internet frequently misinterprets it.
Yeah, I see a lot of confusion about that online.
Undetermined is not a medical synonym for an accident. Conversely, it is not a polite, coded way of saying homicide.
Right.
It means exactly what the word implies. Based on the physical evidence available to the examiner at that specific moment in time, the pathologist cannot definitively conclude whether the death was the result of natural causes, an accident, a suicide, or a homicide.
It is a state of strict medical limbo.
Exactly. But Dr. Mitchell didn't just issue a one-word ruling and walk away.
No, he provided specific, granular details that essentially set the internet on fire.
He noted that he found no evidence of bone fractures or external bruising.
However, he identified a distinct 8 to 12-inch area of deep, soft tissue red discoloration on the back of Nolan's head.
And based on this specific finding, the report explicitly states that foul play cannot be ruled out,
Suggesting that non-accidental factors might have contributed to his death before he entered the water.
This is where we have to dive deep into the science of water recovery forensics.
We really need to explain why independent experts remain highly divided on this specific soft tissue finding.
Because another reviewing forensic pathologist looked at Dr. Mitchell's exact same report regarding the 8 to 12-inch tissue discoloration and stated something completely different.
They said that the head injury described is minor, that it doesn't point to foul play, and could be totally innocent.
How can two highly trained medical professionals look at the exact same physical anomaly and come away with completely contradictory implications?
It all comes down to the inherent, deeply frustrating limitations of interpreting post-mortem artifacts, especially when dealing with a body recovered from water.
And especially during a second autopsy.
Wait, let's break that down. What's the science behind this discoloration?
When a human body expires, the heart stops pumping and gravity takes over. The blood settles in the lowest parts of the body.
This process is called lividity, or livor mortis.
Exactly. When a body is floating or submerged in the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico, the shifting tides and decomposition can cause blood to pool in soft tissues in ways that create large red or purple discolorations.
So, to the untrained eye, and sometimes even to the trained eye, these post-mortem lividity stains look exactly like blunt force bruising.
So to clarify, this 8 to 12-inch red mark on the back of his head could simply be gravity pulling the blood down to his scalp as his body floated in the water after he had already passed away.
Precisely. To definitively determine if a red mark is an antemortem injury, meaning it was a blow to the head that happened before death or just postmortem lividity, pathologists must look for underlying trauma.
Right, like did the skull fracture beneath the discoloration?
Did blood vessels rupture into the tissue in a specific localized pattern indicative of a physical impact?
In his report, Dr. Mitchell explicitly noted there were no underlying skull fractures.
If there are no fractures, and it could just be lividity, why on earth did Dr. Mitchell include the explosive phrase that foul play cannot be ruled out?
Because of the severe physical limitations placed on his examination, this is the crucial technical context that is almost always missing from the public outrage online.
Right. Dr. Mitchell performed a second autopsy.
This means the body had already been surgically dissected by the state medical examiner in Mississippi.
Furthermore, and most importantly, the state retained key organs for their own ongoing investigation.
Specifically, they retained the structures of the neck and the lungs.
That seems wild to a layperson. Why would the state keep his lungs and his neck?
In any suspected drowning or asphyxiation case, the lungs and the delicate structures of the neck, particularly the hyoid bone, are the most critical pieces of forensic evidence.
The state examiner kept them to perform microscopic tissue analysis, right?
Right. To look for diatoms in the lungs, which indicate drowning, or conduct advanced toxicology screenings.
But practically, that means when Dr. Mitchell opened the body in D.C., the most vital puzzle pieces were missing.
He couldn't physically examine the lungs for water aspiration. He couldn't examine the neck for microscopic signs of strangulation or trauma.
I see. So he's essentially being asked to solve the puzzle while the state is holding the most important corner pieces.
That is exactly the situation. When Dr. Mitchell sees a large red discoloration on the back of the head, and he does not have the neck structures or the lungs to give him the full physiological context of how Nolan actually died.
He is scientifically and ethically obligated to say, I cannot rule out foul play.
Right. He isn't affirmatively stating that foul play happened. He is stating that he lacks the physical evidence required to prove it didn't happen.
The legal and social impact of this independent autopsy is actually fascinating.
It really is. It doesn't legally prove a crime occurred, but it acts as a massive accelerant for public perception.
The family and the internet hear the phrase foul play cannot be ruled out, and they feel entirely validated in their suspicion of a cover-up.
Meanwhile, another expert says it's totally innocent lividity, and law enforcement feels validated in their tragic drowning theory.
It operates like a scientific Rorschach test. People see exactly what they are predisposed to see.
Scientific Rorschach test is a brilliant way to phrase it.
The independent autopsy neither proves or disproves a crime.
But, in the court of public opinion, cannot rule out foul play is immediately translated into homicide.
And the scientific ambiguity brings us crashing headfirst into the legal reality of this case, which is defined by a massive institutional void of information.
That ambiguity leaves everyone hanging on the state's official findings.
But those findings are locked behind an absolute wall of silence.
We know the independent autopsy is public, but the state's autopsy, the one with the lungs, the neck structures, the very first unaltered look at the body, is completely sealed.
Let's delve into why officials are maintaining such strict silence and outline the legal mechanisms at play here, specifically regarding the grand jury.
The primary voice attempting to explain this institutional silence to an increasingly angry public has been District Attorney Angel Myers McElrath.
She has released statements assuring the public that the investigation is thorough, that they are working closely with the FBI to examine digital evidence, and that they have interviewed approximately 60 witnesses.
But she's absolutely adamant that she will not rush the process or release evidence prematurely.
She explained that this entire case, including the official, unredacted autopsy results, will be presented to a grand jury.
She noted heavily that this is standard operating procedure for all non-natural deaths in her jurisdiction, and presenting a case to a grand jury is not inherently proof that a crime actually occurred.
It is vital we clarify what a grand jury actually is because the general public often conflates it with a trial.
A grand jury is not a trial jury. They do not sit in a courtroom and decide if someone is guilty or innocent beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right. A grand jury is a group of citizens convened in secret to review the prosecutor's collected evidence and decide a much lower threshold.
Is there enough probable cause to issue an indictment and bring criminal charges against someone? It is a one-sided presentation by the state.
And the rules surrounding a grand jury are notoriously strict.
DA McElrath emphasized her binding legal and ethical obligations to remain quiet regarding the evidence, the medical reports, and the witness interviews.
She can't just tweet out the official autopsy results to calm the public down, even if she wanted to.
No, she absolutely cannot. The fundamental, clarified goal for these strict grand jury evidence disclosure requirements is singular.
To protect the absolute integrity of the investigation and the grand jury proceeding itself.
Exactly.
I hear that, and I understand the legal textbook answer. You want to protect the integrity of the jury.
Right. You don't want a juror seeing a viral TikTok video and making up their mind before they even walk into the room to see the state's evidence.
But let me push back on this system for a second.
Okay, let's hear it.
We are living in 2026. Information moves at light speed. Doesn't institutional silence in a vacuum just breed wild conspiracy?
It definitely does.
At what point does stubbornly protecting the process actually destroy the public's trust in that very process?
If you hide everything behind closed doors for months, the public is naturally going to assume you are hiding a cover-up.
You have accurately identified what is arguably the most difficult systemic balancing act modern law enforcement faces today.
The tension between legal integrity and public transparency is immense.
But consider the prosecutor's nightmare scenario.
If the DA releases the official autopsy report tomorrow, and it contains highly specific, unreleased details about a unique injury, witnesses who haven't been interviewed yet might suddenly change their stories.
They might tailor their memories to align with that medical evidence, either consciously to frame someone or subconsciously because human memory is malleable.
Premature disclosure can entirely ruin a legitimate prosecution by irrevocably tainting witness testimony.
I understand the risk of witness tampering, but the flip side is the catastrophic damage caused by the information vacuum.
It is a devastating trade-off. Nature abhors a vacuum, but the internet abhors it even more.
When officials maintain strict legal silence, that empty space is instantly filled with rumors, amateur sleuthing, and malicious misinformation.
This creates a near impossible situation for local investigators.
They are trying to conduct a clean, hermetically sealed legal process based on centuries-old laws in an era where everyone with a smartphone demands real-time streaming transparency.
The legal system is structurally incompatible with the digital age's demand for instant gratification.
And that legal wall of silence doesn't just frustrate the public, it actively traumatizes the family.
Let's look at the emotional journey of the Wells family, their desperate fight for institutional transparency, and why the local community's distrust of these specific investigators persists so strongly.
Because this investigation isn't happening in a historical vacuum.
No, it is not. To understand the sheer intensity of the family's fight and the immediate national backing they received, we have to look closely at the historical context of where this tragedy occurred.
The family is led by Nolan's parents, Christine and Elmore Wansley. They have become the primary, unwavering spokespeople for their son.
And when you listen to them talk about Nolan, you hear the profound, gut-wrenching grief of losing a child who was doing everything right.
They describe his calming spirit. They talk about his dedication to his athleticism. He was a college football player with a bright future ahead of him.
And most importantly, they emphasize his strict obedience to rules.
His father, Elmore, tearfully recounted how he always taught his sons to stay with the group to ensure their safety.
That character portrait is not just a eulogy. It is vital to understanding why they vehemently refuse to accept the official narrative.
When authorities vaguely suggest an accidental drowning scenario where Nolan casually wandered off or chose to be left behind on an island to talk to a girl, the parents look at the disciplined son they raised and say, that is simply not him.
The behavior you are describing is fiction. You are lying to me.
Driven by that conviction, they decided to fight back against the silence.
They hired high-profile civil rights attorney Ben Crump, who is known for taking on cases of racial injustice.
They commissioned the independent autopsy with Colin Kaepernick's funding to bypass the state.
He reached out to massive public figures. Tyler Perry, Spike Lee, and Terrell Owens have all gotten involved, amplifying the family's voice.
Reverend Al Sharpton even stepped in to offer a reward, which Terrell Owens eventually increased to a staggering $125,000 for information leading to an arrest and conviction.
They are strategically utilizing every single lever of national media and celebrity influence available to force transparency from a closed system.
But we have to analyze why that initial public distrust towards local investigators persists so fiercely.
Why did the family feel the immediate need to bring in Ben Crump before the investigation had even concluded?
Because of the geography and history of where this happened?
A young black teen from Mississippi dying under mysterious circumstances after a trip with white friends evokes a deeply painful, heavily documented history of racial violence and intentionally mishandled cases in the Deep South.
The NAACP has voiced deep structural skepticism of the local authorities' initial quickness to rule out foul play.
This isn't just about one grieving family. It operates as a tragic echo of historical trauma.
When you have a regional history of systemic failures, where historically marginalized communities have been routinely ignored, dismissed, or lied to by local justice systems, trust is not the default setting.
It has to be earned back, inch by agonizing inch.
That is the crucial sociological context. Transparency isn't just a PR buzzword or a luxury for the Wells family.
It is a necessary demand for survival and justice.
When marginalized communities interface with local justice systems, historical precedent tells them that institutional silence often covers up incompetence, or worse, malice.
By bringing in Ben Crump, securing the independent autopsy, and involving national figures, the family is generating immense leverage.
They are ensuring that the Jackson County Sheriff's Office cannot simply quietly close this case without facing intense, unyielding national scrutiny.
But the strategy of bringing in national attention is a double-edged sword.
When you have that level of historical distrust colliding with institutional silence, the internet steps in to fill the void.
Which brings us to the social media firestorm. We need to assess how social media influence radically shapes the public narrative.
And how it has led to dangerous, real-world consequences in this specific case.
The online speculation surrounding the Nolan Wells case has created a secondary whirlwind of rumors that is almost as complex and difficult to untangle as the investigation itself.
TikTok specifically has been a massive driver of this phenomenon, acting as a real-time rumor mill.
Let's run through the major theories that have taken off online. and look at the actual forensic facts that debunk them, because this is where the waters get dangerously muddy for the public.
First, there was the infamous TMZ enhanced audio.
This was a pivotal moment for online sleuths. When the CTOW call was released, outlets like TMZ claimed they had enhanced the audio to make it clearer,
Internet sleuths immediately claimed they could hear hidden voices in the background of the call asking, "Is he dead?" or saying, "Check his chest."
implying a massive conspiracy that Nolan was actually physically on the boat, injured or dead, while the friends made the emergency call.
It sounds incredibly damning until you look at the science.
When a digital forensics expert actually analyzed this audio, the conspiracy fell apart entirely.
The expert noted that the TMZ version was actually 20 seconds longer than the original file released by authorities, and crucially, it had a completely different digital fingerprint.
Let's explain that term. A digital fingerprint, often called a hash value, is a unique string of alphanumeric characters that identifies a specific digital file.
If you alter the file in any way, even just boosting the bass, reducing background hiss, or adding a microsecond of silence, the hash value changes completely.
The expert suggested the TNC audio was altered well beyond simple enhancement.
Furthermore, the original audio was highly distorted and heavily redacted by authorities to protect metadata.
The expert concluded that listeners were succumbing to a psychological phenomenon called auditory pareidolia.
Essentially, the brain seeking familiar patterns in static, meaning people were literally hearing what the TikTok subtitles told them to expect to hear.
Then there was the fully clothed misunderstanding, which went incredibly viral.
People were commenting everywhere. He couldn't have drowned while swimming. He was found fully clothed.
This specific rumor stemmed entirely from a live TV interview with Nancy Grace and the founder of the United Cajun Navy, a volunteer group that assisted in the water search.
Nancy Grace rapidly asked if Nolan was found face down and fully clothed. The founder, trying to answer quickly, simply said, "Yes."
But he later had to issue frantic clarifications that he meant yes to the position of the body face down.
As a seasoned mariner, he considered someone wearing board shorts or swim trunks to be clothed compared to being nude.
The Cajun Navy had to put out an official public statement confirming Nolan was indeed found barefoot and in swim trunks, exactly as you would expect for a teenager swimming at a beach party.
The sheer speed at which a minor semantic misunderstanding on cable news becomes a foundational, unshakable conspiracy theory on TikTok is staggering and deeply alarming for investigators.
And the theories just kept getting wilder and further from reality.
There was the Ida B. Wells connection, claiming Nolan was a direct descendant of the famous anti-lynching activist.
This was used to suggest a racially motivated, targeted attack. But it was completely debunked by Ida's own great-granddaughter, Michelle Duster, who publicly verified there is absolutely no genealogical link between the families.
There were also viral videos circulating of a heated, violent argument near the island, with creators claiming it showed Nolan in a fight moments before his death.
Crayson Shepherd actually had to come forward and publicly state that the video was indeed real, but it was a video of him yelling during a completely separate dispute with an unrelated person, and Nolan wasn't even involved in the altercation.
There was even a photo circulating of Nolan at a pool party that people claimed proved he survived the island and made it back to the mainland.
Which was proven by digital metadata to have been taken on June 27th, a full week before the fateful trip.
We see this true crime sleuthing trend everywhere now, but it forces a deeply uncomfortable question.
When does the noble act of seeking justice cross the line into dangerous digital vigilantism?
How are these local officials supposed to conduct a clean, unbiased investigation when the internet is generating thousands of false leads a day?
And, more importantly, when does this online frenzy become actively dangerous to innocent people?
It becomes dangerous the exact moment it transitions from the digital world to the physical world, which has unfortunately happened here in a severe federal way.
The FBI is now actively investigating interstate threats directly connected to the online frenzy surrounding this case.
Yes, federal charges have already been filed. We have 2 individuals specifically named in our sources: Michelle Edwards from Ohio and Edward Porter from Illinois.
They're both facing heavy federal charges for transmitting threats across state lines.
Michelle Edwards made 21 aggressive phone calls in just 8 minutes to a county clerk's office in Mississippi, threatening the staff with phrases like, "Do not go outside and the clock is ticking," which caused a total building lockdown and paralyzed local government operations.
And the actions of Edward Porter were even more targeted and terrifying.
He is accused of threatening to violently kill a witness and their family.
He escalated it by texting the witness their own physical home address, claiming to be standing outside their house at that very moment.
That is absolutely terrifying for someone who might just be a cooperating witness trying to help.
If we assess how social media influence shapes the public narrative, we have to look critically at the underlying algorithms.
Social media algorithms are not designed to find the truth. They are designed to maximize engagement.
This means they inherently reward sensationalism, outrage, and conspiracy over nuanced facts.
A TikTok video claiming a massive racially motivated police cover-up based on digitally altered audio will get millions of views and shares.
A video carefully explaining the complex medical concept of postmortem lividity will get a few thousand views at best. The system is rigged against the truth.
So this digital frenzy isn't just annoying for police, it actively harms the case.
Immensely. It causes structural damage to the justice system. It taints witness memories.
If you are a witness and you've scrolled past 1,000 videos claiming Nolan was beaten up, you might subconsciously start to remember seeing a fight on the beach that never actually happened.
It wastes massive amounts of finite police resources, forcing detectives to spend hours tracking down and debunking a pool photo from June instead of reviewing actual grand jury evidence.
And ultimately, it makes it profoundly harder for the Wells family to get the clean, uncompromised answers they deserve, because the defense in any potential future trial can point to this massive internet contamination of the jury pool to demand a dismissal.
Let's pull all of these massive complex threads together. We have covered an immense amount of ground today.
We started by mapping a heavily disputed timeline on the shores of Horn Island, a 9:56 a.m. departure, a 3 p.m. separation on the beach, a 4 p.m. emergency call to CTO definitively claiming everyone is on board, and a 4:01 p.m. departure back to the mainland.
We examined the glaring, seemingly impossible contradictions between the friend's narrative that Nolan willingly chose to stay behind and the testimony of the young woman who fully assumed he was getting back on the sinking boat.
We evaluated the deep digital anomalies of his missing phone, his keys left on the mainland, and the highly suspicious absence of any July 4th data.
We dove deep into the complex science of the medical findings, contrasting the sealed state autopsy with the independent report that found a mysterious soft tissue discoloration, but ultimately couldn't rule out foul play due to the state retaining vital organs like the lungs and neck structures.
We mapped at the ironclad, legally mandated silence of a pending grand jury whose singular goal is to protect the fragile integrity of the investigation.
And finally, we traced how that legal silence, when combined with the deep historically justified distrust of Deep South justice systems, created a massive information vacuum.
An information vacuum that an internet mob eagerly filled with algorithms and outrage, resulting in dangerous real-world harassment and severe federal charges.
We live in an unprecedented era where anyone with a smartphone feels deputized to solve a crime.
We all want to be the hero who finds the missing clue, who brings peace to a grieving family.
But as we've seen with the tragic case of Nolan Wells, crowdsourced justice is a deeply, dangerously double-edged sword.
It brings necessary, undeniable national attention to a family that might otherwise be ignored, but it also creates a toxic cloud of misinformation that threatens to choke the actual legal process to death.
It's the ultimate paradox of the locked room mystery in the digital age.
The physical island might be isolated by 10 miles of ocean, but digitally, millions of people have waded onto that beach, leaving their own chaotic footprints all over the evidence, making the original truth almost impossible to discern.
So as you go about your day, consider this final thought.
When the pursuit of the truth online morphs into a weapon of harassment, when county clerks are locked down in terror and cooperative witnesses are receiving death threats from hundreds of miles away, who is really getting justice?
And if that grand jury eventually returns a legal ruling that the internet simply doesn't agree with, will the truth even matter anymore?
Thank you for joining us as we navigated the complexities of this incredibly difficult, ongoing story.
Keep questioning the narrative, keep looking closely at the facts, and we will see you on the next deep dive.